The sound of the old wooden bed creaked in the silence, echoing like a heartbeat in the stillness of that summer night. The air was thick, restless, carrying the smell of freshly cut hay and warm dust. Outside, the moon spilled silver across the cornfields, and somewhere in the distance, a lone dog barked at shadows that refused to vanish. That night, I saw something I should never have seen, something that changed the way I looked at her forever. But before I tell you everything, welcome to Midnight Confession, the place where untold stories of longing, silence, and forbidden memories finally find a voice. If you believe every confession carries a weight we can all feel, then please like, share, and subscribe so you'll never miss the nights when secrets like these come alive. Now let me take you back. My name is Ethan Miller, and I grew up in a quiet farming town in the Midwest, the kind of place where life moved slower than the river that cut across the fields. My father died when I was too young to remember, lost to the ocean he worked on. My brother Daniel, restless and wild, left years ago chasing work that carried him from state to state. That left just me, my mother, and Daniel's wife Grace in the old house that always smelled of wood smoke and soil. Grace was 24 then, barely older than some of the girls who sang in the church choir on Sundays. She wasn't from money, but she carried herself with a softness that felt out of place in our hard little town. People whispered that she and Daniel never had children, and maybe that was why he didn't come back. I didn't know what was true, but I knew what the whispers did. They carved quiet sorrow into her eyes. The nights in that house were heavy with silence. My mother slept early, worn thin by days in the fields. Grace and we carried that silence together, each in our own way. And then came that summer evening under the moonlight when I returned from the creek with a bucket of bullfrogs and mud still on my hands, and I heard water splashing behind the house. I thought it was strange. Mama never bathed that late, and Grace always finished before dusk. Curiosity pulled me to the edge of the yard where the old rain barrel stood by the shed. I crept behind the sycamore tree, the bark rough beneath my fingers. And I looked, and there she was, Grace. Her back glowed pale under the moon, every drop of water catching the light as it rolled down her shoulders. She had tied her hair up, exposing the nape of her neck, delicate and unreal in that moment. My chest tightened, my breath snagged. I was 15 years old, caught between boyhood and something else I didn't yet understand, and my sister-in-law stood before me like a vision I wasn't meant to see. I knew I should turn away. God knows I should have. But I couldn't. I still remember the sound of that night, the echo of my own breathing against the silence, the way the world seemed to hold its breath right alongside me. Nothing moved, not the trees outside, not the restless winds that usually rattled the roof. Just stillness, pressing down on me, heavier than anything I had ever known. People like to say secrets eat away at you slowly, but mine was never patient. It clawed at me, scratched me awake at night, left me restless even under the brightest sun. Every time I thought I had buried it deep enough, life had a cruel way of digging it back up. That night, the past came knocking again, and once more I found myself face to face with the person I swore I'd never see under those circumstances ever again. She looked at me like no time had passed, like the years we spent apart were just smoke between us. Her eyes carried that same fire I had once given everything for, and almost destroyed myself in the process. I didn't say her name right away. I didn't need to. The silence said it for me. We were bound by something no one else would ever understand, a moment in time we could never erase, no matter how many years stretched between us. And standing there in the dark, I realized the truth I had tried so hard to forget. Some confessions never lose their power. They live inside you, waiting for nights like this, nights when the past becomes impossible to outrun. Her voice was the first thing to break the silence. Soft, careful, almost fragile, like she was testing whether the air between us could still hold the weight of her words. "It's been a long time," she said, and just like that, every wall I had built around myself began to crack. I wanted to answer her with something simple, something safe, but the truth is, there was nothing simple about us. There never had been. I nodded instead, my throat tight. My hands felt restless, searching for something to hold on to, but there was nothing but the ache of the past. We stood there in that dim light, not as strangers, but not as who we used to be either, somewhere in between, and that was the hardest place to exist. I thought about the night that bound us together, the night neither of us ever spoke about, the one we both carried like a hidden scar. She must have been thinking the same thing because her eyes softened, her voice dropping lower. "Do you ever regret it?" The question cut through me sharper than any knife. Regret. The word itself carried so many shadows. Did I regret the fire in her touch, the way my heart felt alive for the first time? Or did I regret the consequences that followed, the silence, the distance, the life we lost between us? I opened my mouth, but no words came, only the sound of my breath uneven caught somewhere between truth and denial. She stepped closer. Not much, just enough to remind me of the gravity we could never escape. And in that fragile space, I knew one thing for certain. No matter how far we ran, the past would always find us. I wanted to lie, to tell her that time had washed everything away, that what we once shared was nothing but a faded memory. But standing in front of her now, I realized how foolish that would sound, because nothing about her, nothing about us, had ever truly faded. Her eyes lingered on mine, waiting, searching, and in that silence, the weight of years pressed down on us. Every choice, every distance, every word left unsaid, they all lived here, in this fragile moment. Finally, I whispered, "No, I don't regret it." The truth left my lips before I could stop it. It was raw, unpolished, but it was real, and I saw it strike her, like a match flickering in the dark. Her breath caught, her shoulders tensed, and for a brief second I thought she might turn away. Instead, she smiled. Not the kind of smile people give to strangers, but one laced with sadness, with longing, with something dangerously close to hope. "You shouldn't say that," she murmured. "We both know it's complicated." Complicated. That word had been the shadow following us for years. We had once stood on the edge of something beautiful, something reckless, and we had fallen without thinking of the ground beneath us. That night had bound us together and torn us apart in the same breath. I wanted to reach for her, to close the space between us, but my hand stayed frozen at my side, because wanting her wasn't enough to change the reality we lived in. Instead, I asked softly, "Then why are you here?" She hesitated, biting her lip the way she always did when she carried too much inside. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "Because I couldn't stay away anymore." The world around us seemed to vanish. It was just her, just me, and the unspoken truth hanging heavy in the air. We weren't strangers caught by accident. She came here for me, and that changed everything. Her words cut through me like a quiet storm. Because I couldn't stay away anymore. I should have turned, walked back into the house, closed the door, and locked away everything we had ever been. But the truth? I didn't move. I couldn't. Instead, I found myself studying the curve of her face under the porch light, the way her hair caught the faint glow, and how her eyes, restless yet steady, never let go of mine. "Do you realize what you're saying?" I finally asked, my voice low, almost pleading. She gave a small, almost broken laugh. "Of course I do. I've been rehearsing it in my head for years, but somehow it never came out the way it just did." My chest tightened. She wasn't here by accident. She hadn't just drifted back into town. She had chosen this, chosen me, and yet that same word haunted us again. Complicated. You have your life, I whispered. Your world is far from here. And me, I stayed behind. Her gaze softened, but she didn't flinch. Don't you get it? That night, what we shared, it never left me. Not even when I tried to bury it under everything else. It's like... She paused, searching for words. Like part of me is still there, lost in the woods with you. I felt the memory crash back into me, the warmth of the fire we built, the trembling closeness, the way the night sky seemed to hold its breath while we lost ourselves in each other. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something you could erase. You shouldn't say these things, I murmured again, though my own voice betrayed me with how badly I wanted her words to be true. But I need to, she insisted, because if I don't, if I keep pretending it never happened, then I'll keep living half alive. Her honesty left me standing there, bare and unguarded. I realized for the first time that maybe she wasn't the only one haunted by that night. Maybe I'd been half alive too. The silence stretched between us, thick and fragile. Then, without thinking, I took one step closer. She didn't move away, and in that small space between hesitation and surrender, I knew the past wasn't finished with us. Not yet. The air between us felt charged, heavy with everything unsaid. My step toward her had been small, almost nothing, yet it shifted the ground beneath us. She looked up at me, eyes shimmering as though holding back years of silence. Say it, she whispered. My throat tightened. Say what? That you felt it too, that you still feel it. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from a kind of desperate hope. I swallowed hard. The night around us was quiet, no cars on the road, no wind rustling the trees, just the pounding of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. For years I'd buried it, locked it away in the corners of my memory where no one could reach. But here she was, standing inches from me, tearing the lock apart with nothing but the truth in her voice. I never stopped, I admitted finally. The words burned yet freed me at the same time. Not for a single day. She closed her eyes, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. It wasn't sadness, it was release. And then, before I could think, she stepped closer. So close the faint warmth of her breath brushed against my skin. I should have pulled back, but I didn't. Claire, my voice broke as I said her name. She shook her head softly. Don't? Not now. Just let it be real, even if it's just tonight. Her hand found mine, hesitant at first, then firm, like she was anchoring herself to the only thing that still felt true. My pulse raced, every nerve alive with the weight of the moment. The world beyond us, the years, the choices, the complications, faded. What remained was raw, undeniable. The night we'd once shared had never ended. It had only been waiting for us to return. And as the porch light flickered above, I realized something I'd feared for years. This wasn't just temptation. This was inevitability. The silence between us didn't last. It couldn't. It was too fragile, too charged. Claire's hand was still in mine, her fingers trembling but refusing to let go. The night pressed against us, heavy with the weight of years unspoken. I tried to forget you, she whispered, her voice breaking as though the words themselves were jagged glass. But every time I drove past this town, I remembered that night, the way you held me. It never left me. My chest tightened. I wanted to tell her I'd felt the same, that every shadow in this place still carried her name. But instead I found myself staring at her lips, at the closeness that burned more than any memory ever could. You don't understand, I said, my voice rough, low. I built my whole life around forgetting you, and now you're standing here, undoing it all in a single moment. Her eyes didn't flinch. They held mine steady, daring, pleading. Then maybe you weren't meant to forget. The words pierced me deeper than any truth I had ever heard, and in that breathless pause, the distance between us vanished. My lips found hers, not tentative, not searching, but hungry, aching, desperate for the years we had lost. She kissed me back like someone drowning, clinging to the only lifeline within reach. Every unspoken memory, every suppressed feeling roared to life in that single moment. The porch, the flickering light, the cold night air, it all blurred away. There was only her, the taste of her lips, the warmth of her body pressed into mine. When we finally pulled apart, gasping for air, she whispered against my skin, "This is wrong, and yet it feels like the only thing that's ever been right." I held her face in my hands, my thumb brushing the trail of her tears. Then maybe it's not wrong, maybe it's just us. But deep down I knew the truth. We had stepped onto a road with no way back. The night stretched on, thick with silence after that kiss. Neither of us dared to move, afraid that if we stepped away, the moment would shatter into something we could never reclaim. Claire's breath trembled against my chest, and I could feel her heart racing through the fragile space between us. Finally, she pulled back, just enough for her eyes to meet mine. "Eli," she whispered, almost as if saying my name was dangerous. "What happens now? What if we've already crossed a line we can't undo?" Her words cut me open. She was right. Something had shifted, something permanent. We couldn't pretend anymore, couldn't go back to being old friends who shared a buried memory. The truth was alive now, raw and undeniable. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "Claire, maybe we stopped pretending the moment we met again. Maybe the line was crossed years ago in those woods. Tonight just reminded us we never left it." She looked at me with that same mix of fear and longing, and I could see her wrestling with everything she stood to lose. A life carefully built elsewhere, a fiancé waiting for her in the city, a version of herself that never allowed this small town, or me, to creep back in. And yet she didn't walk away. Instead, she leaned against the porch railing, her arms folding as if to hold herself together. "Do you know what the worst part is?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I prayed I'd forget you. I prayed that night would fade, that the forest, the fireflies, your touch would all blur into something unreal. But the harder I tried to forget, the sharper it became." I stepped closer, so close I could smell the faint trace of her perfume tangled with the night air. I never forgot either, not a single second. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say more, but no sound came. Instead, tears welled in her eyes, tears she didn't wipe away. I didn't kiss her again. Not yet. I let the silence carry the truth between us, because sometimes the quiet says more than words ever could. But I knew one thing for certain: the storm had broken, and nothing, not time, not distance, not the lives we built apart, was going to keep us from facing what came next. The air was thick with unspoken words, and Claire finally broke. She sat down on the porch steps, her hands trembling as she twisted the ring on her finger. That engagement ring, so delicate, so expensive, looked out of place in this quiet Montana night. "I need to tell you something," she said softly, her voice cracking under the weight of it. "When he proposed, I thought I was saying yes to safety, to stability. He's kind, successful, the kind of man any woman would be proud to marry. But," her breath faltered and she buried her face in her hands, "I don't feel alive with him, Eli. I feel numb." Her confession hit me like a punch. I wanted to comfort her, but I also knew these words weren't meant to soothe me. They were her truth spilling out after years of silence. She lifted her gaze, eyes shimmering. "And then I saw you again, just standing there, grease on your hands, that crooked smile that hasn't changed. And I hated myself because in that moment I felt something I thought I'd lost forever." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Claire, you don't have to hate yourself for that. Not with me." She shook her head, biting her lip. but I do. Because it means I was lying to him, to myself, and maybe to you too. Because part of me never stopped waiting for that boy I found in the woods all those years ago. Her words left me trembling. I crouched down beside her, my voice barely above a whisper. That boy never left, Claire. He's still here. He's been waiting too. Her hand slipped into mine, fragile but certain, and for the first time in years, the silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt like a promise. But promises are dangerous things. They demand choices, and choices always come with consequences. And in that small-town night, under the dim glow of a porch light, Claire Hale began to unravel her carefully constructed life, thread by thread, confession by confession. The night had grown colder, but neither of us moved from that porch step. Claire's hand was still in mine, and the warmth of it felt like a dangerous kind of comfort. I knew if I held on too tightly, I might never let go. She broke the silence first. Do you ever think about that night in the woods? About how everything could have been different if we hadn't found each other like that? Her voice trembled on the last words, and I could see the memory flickering in her eyes. All the time, I admitted. My chest tightened as I said it. That night changed everything for me, Claire. I thought maybe it was just a mistake back then, that it was something I'd have to bury. But it never went away. It's like a scar you can't see, but you feel every single day. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She seemed caught between wanting to deny it and wanting to confess the same truth. Finally she whispered, I thought I was the only one who remembered every detail. The way the trees felt like they were keeping our secret. The way I couldn't sleep for weeks afterward because I kept replaying it in my mind. Hearing her admit that nearly undid me. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. You weren't the only one. You were never alone in that. Her breath caught, and in that moment, I could feel her fighting the pull between her heart and her obligations. She was engaged to another man, a man who could give her a life I never could. And yet, here she was, clinging to me like the past was stronger than the future waiting for her. Eli, she said, my name breaking in her throat. What are we doing? I forced myself to look away, staring at the dark fields beyond us. I don't know, I admitted. But whatever it is, I can't seem to stop. Can you? Her silence was the loudest answer of all. In that stillness, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a moment of weakness. This was the start of a storm neither of us were ready to face. The porch light flickered once before going dark, leaving only the moon to trace her face. Claire's hand slipped from mine, but instead of pulling away, she rested it gently on my knee. The weight of it sent a current through me, grounding me and undoing me all at once. I keep telling myself I should walk away, she said, her voice quiet, almost carried off by the wind. But then I think about you, about how you've always been the one who saw me, not just the version of me that everyone else wanted to see. Her confession cut deep because I had spent years wishing she'd say something like that, but now, hearing it, I knew how dangerous it was. You don't know what you're doing to me, I said, my voice breaking as I tried to laugh it off. You're supposed to marry him. You've got a life waiting for you, and me, I'm just... Don't! She interrupted sharply, her eyes flashing in the dim light. Don't you dare make yourself smaller than you are. You were the boy who found me when I was lost. You're the man who still makes me feel like I'm standing on solid ground when everything else feels like it's slipping away. Her words lodged in my chest, heavy and impossible to ignore. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to push her away, to tell her to go back inside and forget the past. But the truth was, I couldn't. My hand found hers again, and this time, I didn't let go. Claire, I whispered, leaning closer, if we keep this up, there's no turning back. Her breath trembled as she leaned in, her forehead resting against mine. Maybe I don't want to turn back. The world around us seemed to fall away, the crickets, the cold night air, even the porch beneath us. all I could feel was her, and the truth that had been buried for years rising to the surface. We hadn't kissed. Not yet. But the pull between us was undeniable, like the space between us was charged with every unsaid word, every memory we'd tried to forget. And in that moment, I realized we were standing at the edge of something that could either destroy us or finally set us free. The silence between us was trembling, stretched thin like a thread about to snap. Claire's breath brushed against my lips, and for a moment, neither of us moved. We just hovered there, caught between restraint and surrender. Then it happened. Her mouth found mine, not tentative, not hesitant, but desperate, as though years of buried longing had finally broken free. The taste of her was familiar and new all at once, a reminder of that night in the forest, and a promise of something neither of us dared to name. My hands slid up her arms, anchoring her closer, while she clutched the back of my shirt as if afraid I might disappear. The kiss was not gentle. It was the kind that carried history, regret, and hunger. When we finally pulled apart, both gasping, her eyes searched mine. "Tell me this is wrong," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Tell me to stop." But I couldn't. Every part of me rebelled against the lie. "I can't," I said, my voice raw, "because I've wanted this for too long." Her forehead pressed against my chest, and I felt her tears dampen my shirt. "I thought I could bury it," she admitted. "I thought if I built a different life, it would fade. But you, Micah, you never left me. Not really." Hearing my name like that, trembling with everything she'd hidden, undid me. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight, as though that might protect her from the consequences we both knew were coming. "We can't pretend anymore," I said. "Whatever this is, it's real, but it's also dangerous. If anyone knew—" "I don't care," she cut in, her voice fierce through the tears. "For once in my life, I don't want to care about what anyone else thinks. I just want us." The night deepened around us, but inside a fire had been lit that neither of us could put out. We stayed there holding each other, knowing the line had been crossed, knowing we had stepped into a truth that could change everything. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like running. The storm outside grew heavier, rain hammering against the cabin roof, drowning out the world beyond those wooden walls. Inside, everything felt suspended. Time, reason, fear. All that existed was her and me. Claire lifted her head slowly, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. There was no hesitation left in her gaze, only a raw, unguarded hunger. My heart slammed in my chest, as if it had been waiting for this moment ever since that night years ago. When her lips found mine again, the kiss burned hotter, pulling us both into something we couldn't undo. My hands cupped her face, tracing the curve of her jaw, memorizing her as though she might vanish the moment I blinked. She whispered against my mouth, breathless, "Micah, I don't want to fight it anymore." I pulled back just enough to see her face to make sure she meant it. The truth was written all over her, longing, fear, and the courage it took to finally surrender. My voice shook as I answered, "Then don't." Her hands slid over my shoulders, down my back, pulling me closer until there was no space between us. The warmth of her body against mine erased the years, erased the silence, erased everything except this undeniable truth. We had always been heading back to this moment. The fire flickered low, shadows dancing over her skin as we moved together, hesitant at first, then with an urgency that came from too many years of restraint. Every touch was both discovery and remembrance. Every breath felt like confession. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, we created a storm of our own, one born of years of silence and unsaid words. When it was over, she lay curled against me, her hand resting on my chest, where my heart still thundered beneath her palm. The world felt impossibly still, as if holding its breath for what we had just done. Claire whispered, almost too soft to hear, We can never go back now, can we? I closed my eyes, pressing a kiss to her hair. No, I murmured, and I don't want to, but even as I said it, I knew the cost of what we had done would come for us. Secrets like ours never stayed hidden forever. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the air damp and heavy with silence. I woke first, the gray light of morning seeping through the thin curtains. Claire was still curled against me, her breathing soft, her hand resting loosely across my chest. For a fleeting second, I let myself imagine this was our life, that waking beside her wasn't borrowed, stolen, or forbidden. But reality doesn't pause for long. As the fire burned out, the chill crept back in, and so did the weight of what we had done. Claire stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment she smiled, a quiet, vulnerable smile that made my chest ache. Then I saw it, the shift, the shadow crossing her gaze when memory caught up with her. Neither of us spoke at first. Words felt dangerous, too sharp to handle so soon. Finally she whispered, "Micah, what have we done?" I reached for her hand, holding it tight even as she tried to pull away. "We did what we've been carrying inside us for years," I said, my voice low, steady. "We stopped pretending." Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought them back. "But we can't live in this cabin forever. Out there, people will never understand. My life, your life, they don't fit together." Her words cut deeper than any blade, because she wasn't wrong. We were two people bound by a past we couldn't erase and a night we couldn't undo, and yet the thought of letting her go again felt unbearable. The hours slipped by in heavy silence. When we finally dressed and stepped outside, the ground was slick with rain, the world washed clean but fragile. Claire walked ahead, her arms folded tightly around herself, as if holding together the pieces of her resolve. At the edge of the clearing, she stopped and turned back to me. Her voice trembled. "We can't let anyone know. Not now. Not ever." I swallowed hard, my jaw tight. "And what about us?" She hesitated, eyes searching mine with a desperation that mirrored my own. Then she whispered, "Us has to stay here." The word shattered something inside me, but I nodded because I loved her enough to carry the weight of her fear. Still, deep down, I knew the truth. Secrets like this don't stay buried, and the world we were walking back into had sharp edges waiting for us both. We left the cabin that morning as if nothing had happened. Claire's car was still parked at the edge of the old logging road, mud splashed across its doors, leaves caught in the wipers. She brushed them away with trembling hands, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. The ride back into town was quiet. The radio stayed off, and the only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint hitch in Claire's breathing every so often, like she was swallowing words she couldn't let escape. I stared out the window, watching the mist curl along the hills, memorizing the silence because I knew it was the last silence we'd share like this. When we reached her street, she pulled over before the house came into view. She didn't want the neighbors to see, didn't want questions or whispers. She turned to me, her hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles went pale. "Micah," she said softly, almost a plea, "what happened between us? It has to stay ours. No one else can ever know." I nodded, though my chest burned with the weight of it. "But does that mean we just forget?" Her eyes shimmered, holding back tears. "No, we don't forget. We carry it, quietly." She leaned over then, pressing her forehead to mine, a fleeting touch that held more sorrow than all the years apart. And then just like that, she was gone, slipping from the car, walking quickly down the street, her figure swallowed by the ordinary life waiting for her. I sat there long after, my hands gripping the seat where her warmth still lingered. Part of me wanted to chase her, to demand more than stolen nights and broken promises. But another part of me, maybe the wiser part, knew that sometimes love doesn't get to live in the light. Sometimes it survives only in confession, spoken once and carried forever. That night, back in my own small room, I finally let the tears come, not for regret, but for the truth we couldn't outrun. Claire Hale would go on with her life, and I would go on with mine. But in the quiet hours when the world is hushed and the soul feels bare, I would remember the storm, the fire, the taste of her lips, and the way her voice trembled when she said, "us." And maybe that was enough. Maybe some loves are meant not to be lived, but to be remembered, confessed in the silence of midnight, where only the heart listens. Some confessions can only be spoken in the dark. We carry them not to boast, but to remember that once our hearts dared to burn, dared to cross a line. Claire and Micah's story closes here, yet its echo lingers. Quiet, aching like a beautiful scar. They couldn't choose each other in the light, but they reached each other in the deepest part of the soul, and perhaps that too is a kind of love, a love without a perfect ending, but strong enough to be remembered, strong enough to whisper at midnight, "Once I loved like this."